Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. Assalamu alaikum to you all. Good afternoon. I am being put on the hot spot. The presentation was supposed to be made by my chairman, Dr. Lamin Sosseh, who unfortunately is not here. But I happen to be his vice chair throughout the commission, so I have the institutional memory of what was required of Dr. Sosseh. And out of reference to my former chair, I stand to make the presentation on his behalf. Two of my colleagues from the Gambia are here. That is the former executive secretary of the TRRC and a very valued partner from a CSO called Aniket. They deal with enforced disappearances. I'm sure they may jog my memory if I have some lapses. But I want to say that for the Gambia TRRC, the public hearings were the most outstanding success of the process. We had three things that we had to do with it, and one was establishing the truth of the past violations that had occurred in the 22 years of Jammeh's dictatorship. Our case was different. We had a dictatorship, a brutal dictatorship, which existed for 22 years, who wanted to obliterate anyone who stood up against him or whom he thought would stand up against him. So we had the task of establishing the truth. We had to promote peace and reconciliation and healing. And the third one was reparations. I was responsible for reparations. I was supposed to speak tomorrow, but I will speak for my chairman today. Now, we had to do a lot of work before we started the public hearings. And thanks to the fantastic work of the Secretariat, who had already put in place a research and investigation unit to investigate those cases that were known to them, and to contact the victims and encourage them to make their statements. And from the perspective of the Commission, we had met severally to decide on those themes that we wanted to address. The themes were too numerous. With Yahya Jammeh's dictatorship, it was just severally down the line that he had just created all sorts of atrocities. So we had to be selective, and we agreed on 23 teams, which in the end, because of COVID, we had to cut down to 19. And these included the attacks on the military. Anytime that he thought there was going to be a coup d'etat, he clamped down on the military and destroyed them brutally. He clamped down on school children. He even went to the extent of having witch hunts. In this day and age, you cannot imagine anything as senseless as having a witch hunt. I'm just giving you a synopsis of those things that we investigated. We investigated his fake presidential HIV/AIDS treatment, the brutal treatment that those people who were he said he was curing them, and at the same time, he was destroying their lives. So in short, these are just some of the examples that we had to listen to. But after we had agreed that these were the things that we were going to listen to, how did we do it? First of all, I would really love to compliment Albi, because a lot of things were based on the South African Truth Commission, where we had public hearings. And the public hearings were not only limited to victims. We had said that this was going to be a victim-centered commission. But if you listen, there are always two sides to a story. If you listen to the victims, you also have to listen to the perpetrators. And in addition to listening to the perpetrators, you have to listen to those institutions that helped Yahya Jammeh to implement his brutal reign. So we looked at three institutions, and those three institutions were the judiciary, the prisons, and the NIA. The judiciary, because they were the ones who were changing the laws. I think by the time Jammeh finished, we had changed our laws 54 times. Any time that he thought a law needed to be changed to fit in with his agenda, he got the judiciary to change it for him. The other was the prisons. The prisons, instead of being a normal place for correction, was now used as a place for torture, for killing. For a part of the prison was not part of the prison. It was just cut off, and you would ask the prison officials did not even know that this existed within the prison. So that is where he took these top state officials. I'm going too fast, or I've gone beyond time? No, he's saying something to me. Let me go on. I go on, okay. These people were sequestered and nobody knew that they were there. They were clamped for months, they could not walk. They were subjected to fake executions. They were denied food. Their families did not even know where they were. So that was one aspect of the prisons that we looked at, the horrendous setup of the prisons. Because in addition to listening, having the public listening, we also went on-site visits. So we have got 2 main prisons in the Gambia. We visited those 2 main prisons, and it was just horrible. In addition to the prisons, the NIA, which is supposed to be the National Investigation Agency, turned out now to be a torture house, where people were sequestered, they were castrated, they were subjected to all sorts of inhumane behavior. And how the Gambians know that these things existed was through the public hearings. Gambians would know that something had happened, and they would never accept that it was done by a Gambian. They would say, you know, yeah, Jammeh has brought in foreign mercenaries, and they are the ones who are responsible for these disappearances. They are the ones who are responsible for all the evils. And the public hearings broke the myth. Gambians now realized that it was their fellow brothers who were brutalizing them. It was unbelievable that a Gambian could look at his fellow Gambian and do so much of harm to your brother or to your sister. Others have spoken about sexual gender-based violence. That was not an easy theme to address because people did not want to come forward. But for the 2.5 years that we did public hearings, we became a household name, not only in the Gambia and in the continent, but in Europe. So the days that we were late to even start due to technical problems or because a victim had not come, we would be inundated with messages and phone calls. Why have you not started? We are waiting for you to start TRRC and you have still not started. People were really hooked on to the TRRC process. And we made it friendly, again, borrowing from Albi, that we use the languages of the people. At first, we started in English. Then people started complaining, hey, you people, you are sitting there talking in English, we don't know what you're talking about. And immediately, the Secretariat made sure that we had translations in all the national languages, simultaneous. Mandinka, Wolof, Pular, and when there was need for Jola translations, we did not have many Jolas because Yahya Jammeh comes from the Jola ethnic group, and even though they suffered a lot, they did not want to testify against their own ethnic person. So the Jolas were not forthcoming. But in the instances that we had 1 or 2 Jolas, we would make special arrangement for a Jola translator to come in and translate in their languages. And when we did the Ghanaian one, several Ghanaian migrants were killed in the Gambia on the pretext that they were mercenaries. We had to get Ghanaian interpreters to come and speak in the Ghanaian languages so the Ghanaian communities could hear what was being said. So we brought it to the doorstep of the people in languages that they could understand. And after the, the victims testified, we made sure that the perpetrators came in to testify. For the victims, it had to be voluntary. And not all victims wanted to testify publicly. So there was room for protected hearing. There was room for private hearings where the public would not know that these hearings took place. But the public hearings, there was always the space and the time for people to hear the story that was being told on that thematic area. Now for the witch hunts, we had to go to the communities because a whole community had been subjected to this accusation of witch hunts. So we went to the communities and we chose 3 of the communities, 1 in the North Bank and 2 in the West Coast region, Jambur and Sibanor. Other communities were really affected by the witch hunts, but because, as I said, they came from the ethnic group of Yaya Jammeh, they did not want to talk about their victimization. And why did he do the witch hunts? He said his auntie had died and the auntie was eaten by one of the witches. So he had to make sure, I'm laughing, it's not funny, that no witches existed in the Gambia after his aunt died. But the reality is that that was not even the true story. The story when the people that participated in the witch hunts came, they said that the chief witch that existed was after Yaya Jammeh. So Yaya Jammeh had to make sure, he did not know who the chief witch was there. So any person that he thought was a witch, male, female, child, you were accused. It was traumatic. We went to the communities. Some of the poor people, they were in the market. A whole brigade of people in red, these were the witch hunters from outside the Gambia, would come because we don't have expertise in witch hunters, and take you out in public. And these women were, men, women, children, were traumatized. They were brutalized. But there were differences in how they treated the witch hunt. Some people were just accused of being a witch, put, loaded on trucks, taken away for a day and allowed to go back. Others had to drink a concoction for several days to make them confess that they were witches. And because they drank these concoctions, they hallucinated and agreed that they were witches. Some were beaten mercilessly. One of the women was sexually abused. So these are the things that the public hearings brought to the front of the Gambian public and the world at large. But what we want to say is that the Gambians were living under a false conception that it was not their brothers who were doing this. It was outsiders. So the evil, man, you can never talk about the evil that is inherent in human beings. It just takes something to spark off a person to go against another person, to want to obliterate them from the face of the society. And most of the young people, the soldiers that came, they would always say, oh, we were young, we did not know what we were doing, we were told that we had to safeguard our country. So these are the excuses that you have to think of. Most of them were just, I think, power hungry. Because Yaya Jammeh had set up a special squad called the junglers. The junglers, they say they are not junglers, they were the patrol team. But when he was recruiting them, he brought them in as a patrol team to be patrolling the Gambian borders. And by the time he finished, they had been trained into a top killer squad who did not only kill Gambians, but killed non-Gambians as well. They killed 64 Ghanaians who were trying to go by the back way. I don't know whether the term back way is familiar to you. Young people who are trying to go through illegal migration. They landed accidentally on Gambian territory. Somebody told them, oh sir, we have seen mercenaries on Gambian soil, and that was their death warrant. They were taken to the forests and slaughtered by the junglers. The junglers told the stories themselves. It was not us talking, it was the junglers informing the public of how they shot them one by one into this well. We were able to determine the names of the Ghanaians. To date, we cannot tell you where the well is. We know it is somewhere between the Gambia-Senegal border. So these are the things that ANICED are dealing with, the case of enforced disappearances. We could not establish where many of the remains were. The November 11th victims, we could determine where they were because some of them were buried in the army barracks. So in short, the truth must be told. It must be told from the perspective of the victim. It must be told from the perspective of the perpetrators and the people who suffered what they suffered. Like the parents of the 14 children who went to school 10th and 11th April and were shut down because the students wanted to demonstrate and they were shut down mercilessly. So it's just the parents now, the students are dead, but their own counterparts in school who experienced that merciless day, the parents and the communities. There are multiple layers of establishing the truth. But the only thing that we agreed on was anybody who would be eligible for reparations, you must have told the truth. Anybody who was discovered to have lied to the commission would have been penalized and you would not be eligible for reparations or for amnesty. Now, that was a very good case that Ally brought in because for our case, when those people told the truth at the commission, applied for amnesty, the Amnesty Commission recommended that they be given amnesty. There was a public outcry. How can we allow these killers and sexual abusers to now be given amnesty? So I think the courts will decide because the recommendations have been made and they have been submitted to the government. Luckily, they accepted most of the recommendations that were based on the public hearings. And again, like whichever, we are going to have a hybrid court. And it is the most culpable, based on those things that were said at the commission, that will face the law. Now, let me look at those. So I've talked about the successes, but also we did video links. People who could not travel from abroad to come and testify before the commission, arrangements were made for them to testify via video link. So technology really was on the side of the TRRC. We had the television stations covering it, we had radio covering, we had video links, we had Facebook. All these technologies were on the side because people were seeing at first hand what was happening. There were no narrations afterwards. It was presented to them raw. And sometimes it was just too raw. Now for our problems, sometimes the technology failed us. You will come, there will be no sound, or there will, the lights have gone off, and there will be delays. We also had the one and only time that we had a problem with a perpetrator was when the former Vice President of Yahya Jammeh was called to testify on the killing of his colleague, a former Minister of Finance. He came to the commission and refused. He came and said he had immunity. He was not going to, how do you call it, testify. Because, I told you how do you call it? The laws were changed and changed and changed. So he was banking on the law that gave him immunity for everything that they did while they were in office. But the law that gave them immunity for everything that they did while they were in office was for their work, but not when you go and murder your fellow minister. The evidence was that a former minister himself, the brother of the former minister, took this minister on false pretenses to his own house and murdered him in his house and then got rid of the body. How they got rid of the body was they took Korosise, put him in a car, drove him to one of the outskirts villages and burnt the car to ashes. The next morning, all people saw was the charred remains of the late minister. So the evidence was glaring that he participated, but he did not want to talk on the grounds of immunity. He is the one who regretted it, because Dr. Sosseh immediately wrote for contempt of court. And don't be friends with soldiers. 1 minute they are very nice, next minute they can be something else. Those soldiers who used to be so nice and deferential to him, when they came to arrest him, you will think there was the TRRC was a war zone. They came in their cars, but then the public also, we were inside the commission, we did not know that the public were so annoyed that the young men and young women were running from their homes with sticks and stones to stone him to death for killing Koro Sosseh. So it is good that these army officers all came. So unfortunately for him, when you are proud and arrogant, you create more problems for yourself. In addition to the contempt of court, while he was still in prison, waiting his verdict on the contempt of court, the Ministry of Justice went ahead and filed charges against him for the murder of Koro Sosseh. So he has now been sentenced to death. Unfortunately, as I said, it is so sentenced to death by hanging. You don't even want to hear sentenced to death by hanging in this day and age. But this is one of the, maybe the successful outcomes, but also one of the challenges that we had, that some of the people could come and not want to testify. It was not many, it was just in his case. Because we had the junglers, we had one of the soldiers, I've forgotten his name, because he cried so much. He participated in the killings of the 11 soldiers of the 10th and 11th of November. And he said that not only did he kill, but because one of them could not fit in the car, he had to break his legs before he went into the car. So I don't know whether, today is a sad day for us in the Gambia. One of the former ministers, O.J. Jallow, who was a victim of Yaya Jammeh, he was a former minister of agriculture in the Jawara regime, who was severely tortured. When Yaya Jammeh came in, it was the PPP government. And he made sure that he arrested all the PPP, how do you call it? All the PPP ministers and all the top officials. Took them away to a hangar in the military barracks, kept them there for 12 months initially. Their families did not even know they were there. It was after Red Cross intervened that people knew where they were, denied them of a bath, denied them of food. It was just horrible. And this OJ was brutalized by one of the soldiers who spoiled his eye, broke his arm. But when OJ came to the commission and testified about everything that he suffered, he said, I have forgiven everyone who participated in my brutalization and torture. I have forgiven them all. And then Oya Jallow, Oya was the boy that broke his eye and broke his arm. He testified as a perpetrator. He came and testified and agreed that he had done all these things and apologized to OJ. And said, I'm very sorry, we were misled into thinking that you wanted to destroy the country. So every day we had an agenda of how to make life miserable for you. Today, unfortunately, OJ has passed away. The outcome of these illness, of these tortures, is that all these people developed stress-related diseases. Whether it was their kidneys, whether it was their hearts, or their whatever, their organs. So OJ has been suffering since then. So today he succumbed to eternity. We pray that he rests in perfect peace. I don't know whether I've done justice. As I said, I was just stepping in. This was on my paper. I hope. I'm supposed to talk tomorrow, and tomorrow I'll be in. But Baba, you okay? I can go. Siraj, thank you very much.